Last Sunday, March 8th, was International Women's Day. Dr. Sane gave me an opportunity on that important day to share my views as a present day woman who grew up in Maharashtra in India, was fortunate enough to be trained as a medical professional, then able to move here to the USA, my new country, at an early age of 25. I shared with you my personal life story, my arranged marriage, the practice of arranged marriages in India, my personal upbringing and lives of other women in India, my personal life experiences here as a recently married woman from a different culture in a totally alien country. In the second part of the talk, I will share some experiences I had in the context of my work, as well as in the context of traditional religious rituals. I will give you insights that I gained from my journey. In the end, I will leave ample time for the audience, particularly women, to chime in and express their invaluable thoughts from their own experiences in India and in the USA. That way, we will all be better informed and try to even be better human beings. I mentioned last week that we live in Bakersfield, California. Abhay, my husband, had moved there in 1996. Kaiser Permanente had hired him to start their department of hematology oncology. 9 months later, I completed my residency and started looking for jobs. The Department of Internal Medicine at Kaiser had no openings at the time. I interviewed with another local group but was hesitant to join them. Even before I signed their contract, they prematurely announced my recruitment at a hospital joint meeting. The chief of internal medicine at Kaiser was at that meeting. He had seen my CV, but his hands had been tied because no position was open at Kaiser. When he realized the other group was gaining a candidate who had some impressive recommendations, he got restless. He called the regional office and made them open a position for me instantly. Kaiser definitely had a better reputation. It is a physician owned and governed group with over 5,000 physicians spread across the state of California. I was happy I didn't have to work elsewhere. Like all new hires, I was hired as an associate. I would be closely observed for my work ethics and clinical competence for 3 years before getting advanced to partnership. In those days, we would have to work shifts at the urgent care, usually from 6 to 10 p.m., in addition to the 8 to 5 job. The additional work was compensated with extra money. The same chief who had gone out of his way to hire me would frequently work in urgent care. He was a good guy, friendly, but everyone knew him to be lazy. He would get administrative time during the day, that is, no patients to see in paid time, and then volunteered to work in the evenings for extra pay at a premium rate. Nothing wrong with that, except when he worked, he would just stand there chatting with the staff, while the rest of us would be seeing patients non-stop till the end of our shift. I shared last week an example about how I lacked diplomatic skills. I could be trusted to speak out the truth without thinking of consequences. Notwithstanding the fact that I was a newly hired associate, I confided with my mentoring physician and told him about what I had observed at urgent care. He, in turn, passed on my complaint to the larger partnership. They were hearing from an associate how we took home the same money after evening shifts, but rest of us worked in actuality and our chief didn't. Speaking up against my own chief could have potentially cost me my job. Surprisingly, that didn't happen. He made lame excuses like I chat because I get bored. But he realized he was watched and soon changed his behavior. I give him credit that he never held it against me, never retaliated against me. He gave me great evaluations year after year and stood behind me at every step since then. One of his comments in an annual chief's evaluation was, "She speaks her mind." 3 years later, when I was up to be confirmed as a partner, an incident happened that surely made me speak my mind. Whenever an associate was being considered for partnership, there would be first a meeting with all partners and associates to gather a general opinion from everybody. Then associates would leave the room and partners would confer in a closed door meeting. By the time my partnership evaluation came up, Abhay was already a partner. So ideally, he would be in the closed door meeting. There was a senior male colleague who had reservations and strong opinions about me. He had arrived at the conclusion that I'm not a good doctor and I treat my patients badly. Whether being a woman or immigrant or person of color had anything to do with his thinking, I would never know. During a staff meeting, he came all fired up to make sure I don't become a partner. In my presence and Abhay's presence, he made an allegation of nepotism. In his mind, Abhay's good standing was the sole reason for me to be hired. He urged the partnership to carry the closed door meeting without Abhay in the room so partners would not feel uncomfortable to speak the hard truths about his wife. In other words, he insinuated that without Abhay, the partners would never vote for me. My pride had been hurt. My parents had never had to help me, even with school homework. No one from my family ever had to put in a word for me to get into medical school or this job. I didn't rely on Abhay for medical decisions or to further my career. I told my colleagues and our medical director that day that we Risbuds are not a buy one get one free deal. As I stood there defending my record and my qualifications, nobody, not even Abhay, spoke up. It was me, it was making me more furious as we both left the room. In that closed door meeting, my chief read out the glowing letters of recommendations from my professors during residency, based upon which he had hired me. Other colleagues spoke about their experiences with me. Quality related issues were discussed. Reviews from patients were taken into account and carried the most weight. I was voted into the partnership with only one colleague voting no, that same man who had an issue with me. My public humiliation, I realized later, had nothing to do with who I was or how I was performing. If I knew better at the time, I would have remained cooler. But the incident remains ingrained in my memory for several reasons. It serves as a reminder of the contrast between men. Out of the two white American men, one was my chief, who was supportive and objective, despite me pointing out his fault one day. The other was a colleague who I had never done any wrong, but he saw me in a different light. And thirdly, my Indian husband, who chose to remain silent when I was being insulted. Does it remind you of a well known episode from the Mahabharata? The time when Draupadi was being humiliated in the court after the dice game and learned men in the court sat silent. But there was an even more important lesson I learned from this episode so many years later when I reflected on it. The day after the incident at the partner meeting, my medical director had come to my office. He was a very sensitive man, a psychiatrist by training. He was a witness to what had happened at the meeting and was feeling really bad about how I had been treated. He urged me over and over again to go talk to the colleague who had insulted me, tell him who I am so his bias would be erased. I had immense respect for my director, but alas, I wasn't prepared for approaching a hostile colleague at the time. Perhaps I was too proud, also somewhat intimidated by the colleague who was a physically tall, hefty man weighing around 300 pounds and who always spoke in a thundering tone. I'm not the same person now as I was in my 30s. If that incident were to happen today, I would see the wisdom of my medical director, set aside my ego and fear, and open the door for discussion with that colleague who obviously didn't know me. But then I was also unsure of myself at the time. What would I have told him? I was just a young woman in a foreign land trying to establish an identity for myself through my work. Challenges kept coming not only from attitude of this colleague but also from patients and occasionally the staff I worked with. For me, the patient culture had dramatically changed when I took up a job. My residency in Los Angeles was at a county hospital where patients were poor, often unemployed, and even homeless. The irony is that poverty rendered them to be polite and show genuine gratitude for staff and doctors. Patients who had the money to pay for high premiums for their insurance often showed entitlement and arrogance. Not infrequently, the doctor's gender became a sticky issue. There were men who were outright rude and disrespectful. Some forgot basic manners and talked to female doctors in a vulgar manner. Dr. Sane mentioned about an incident from 60 years back when his wife, an extraordinary endocrinologist, was asked by a patient, "When will the doctor come?" That stereotype has not been washed off even today. A much younger colleague of mine now wears a plaque on her white coat that says, "Doctor, not nurse." My husband and my son, who are both doctors, may never know that these stereotypes exist in the USA unless they hear from me or their female peers. I will add here that even in my mom's era, women doctors in India were not only recognized as doctors, they were highly respected and to a large extent even equated to gods. Several decades after her retirement, when my mom visits our hometown or meets her old patients anywhere around the world, she enjoys the same status. Now, let me tell you about the female patients I see in my practice. Basically, I see women starting the age of 18, and my oldest living patient is 104 years old now. I have had the privilege to be a primary physician for some truly remarkable women, one of them being Dolores Huerta, a recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom, who is in her 90s now and is an activist since she was in her 20s. She was one of the frontline leaders joining in the fight for the rights of farm workers in California, along with Cesar Chavez. Even today, she shows up in her office and champions causes she passionately believes in. One such cause is to eliminate middle management and establish a single payer system for healthcare. She has already enforced it for the Farm Workers Union. On one hand, there are women like her who constantly inspire me. On the other hand, there are women whose lives show an entirely different picture. I saw a female patient once who wanted a female as her primary doctor. But not just any female doctor, she was specific. She wanted a female internist, not a female family medicine doctor. And she had presumed it would be a white American female internist. So it was a surprise for her when I entered the room. That same day, she requested to switch to another doctor, a female internist who was American, one who looked and sounded American, one without a foreign accent and foreign features. She did not hide her disappointment about getting an Indian female doctor. I joked about it to my colleagues that where accent was concerned, she had an exotic menu available to choose from. We were three of us in my building and a few more at other locations. Of the two other female internists working with me at the time, one was Bulgarian and the other was Burmese. In the other buildings, one was a Gujarati, one was Malayali, one Punjabi, one Chinese, one Filipino, and another Burmese. All had thicker accents than me. The fact is that it is difficult to lure individuals born and raised in the USA to commit to a life in smaller towns like Bakersfield. If immigrants too showed unhappiness about living here, there would be no happy and competent doctors available for the folks who live here. America has been generous to welcome legal immigrants, but lagged behind in adapting in healthy ways to the diversity that it created. Let me switch to another important topic. There are women who I see from time to time for injuries that I recognize immediately as occurring from domestic violence. One such young woman was herself a police officer, came with bruises around her eyes and a broken nose. Spousal abuse is more prevalent than you would like to think. In my observation, women who are educated and or unemployed are often voiceless to resist exploitation and oppression. Yet sometimes even women in jobs of authority, like the police officer, remain silent. Abuse occurs in many forms: physical, psychological, financial, professional. A large number of abused women never find their own voice or a way to get out of this situation. As a physician, I have met women not just in the USA but also in India who are victims of abuse. Not sure of the laws in India, but here in the USA, the law requires me to file a report if I even remotely suspect abuse. The reality is that even if the law is in place and the medical professionals do their part, the report of abuse brings no reprieve to victims of the abuse. Why? Because when the social worker and police respond to the report, the victim dismisses the report, denies abuse, and refuses to identify or turn in the perpetrator of her abuse. Fear, intimidation, and lack of confidence of living independently are the main reasons for this denial to accept external help. Mind you, these are women in the USA that I just mentioned. While we are on the subject, let me briefly turn to my observations in India. A large part of the preventive medicine related task for last 3 years in India was to address tobacco and alcohol addiction as well as women's health. In that capacity, I saw a noticeably greater number of women smoking and drinking than in my generation. Sadly, this has been an unintended outcome of education and financial independence. During my work, I also met both educated and uneducated women who were victims of abuse. Alcoholic husbands who squander the earnings while the woman works multiple jobs. Men who beat up their wives when they are drunk or when she refuses to give him money for the alcohol. Men who don't digest their wife's success and make that an excuse to drown in alcohol or mock her at every opportunity. I saw many such cases. One of the staff nurses in the hospital who was pregnant with her second child came to me for advice about her husband who had severe anger issues and would insanely beat up their 8-year-old son at the slightest fault of the boy. Even when the husbands are not amenable to intervention like counseling and other things, leaving them and seeking personal safety was not an option these women were willing to consider. If I even made an indirect suggestion to that effect, they would not return to see me. Social pressures are tremendous for these women. They rather suffer and even die at the hands of the perpetrators than seek freedom. And then there is a whole different set I have seen where the women don't have time to discuss freedom. They just live freely. They don't negotiate. They simply choose to exercise their rights without a word. They don't wait for the men to catch up with their concepts of freedom and equality. Don't bother to give such men another chance, nor do they apologize for living life on their terms. Suffering and rebellion. I saw how both could operate in silence. Between these polar opposites, I saw a spectrum of chaos. This chaos was filled with constant grumbling and brewing resentment, active and passive resistance, fights for survival, fights for recognition and appreciation, activism, protests, debates, dialogues, education, critical analysis, in varying degrees and various forums. I've started to recognize that noise has its value. Had it not been for this noise, many women would still not be getting college degrees or earning the right to vote. Many women would not have the right to inheritance. Many couldn't have opened a bank account, had a credit card on their name, or bought a house. Many would still be taking home lesser salary for the same work as their male co-workers. Many couldn't have driven a car or flown a plane. Many couldn't have run for office or sat on the Supreme Court. Many couldn't have sought legal separation and settlement from an abusive spouse. Everything I'm able to enjoy today is because someone fought for it. Taking any of these for granted would be a sign of ignorance. Even today, I encounter men who believe that women have no rights to inheritance. I realize acutely how any of these rights that my generation doesn't protect fiercely will be lost for our daughters and granddaughters to enjoy. Which is why a good idea of history becomes essential for everyone. Patriarchy, as I have seen it, comes in many forms and has roots that run deep into the psyche of not just men, but also women. As described from several incidents last week and today, I saw it in my home and see it in the homes of my extended family and friends. I see it at work. I see it manifest bluntly on a daily basis in the socio political scene. I spent a good amount of time trying to understand the conditioning of the minds of women who just endure the injustice meted to them. The fighter in me always resented educated and working women who suffered at the hands of men or other women. But slowly, I realized that the problem was greater than the individual woman. It was the entire sphere, the broader scheme of things around her, that village around her, which was responsible for how she negotiated her circumstances. Sometimes mothers teaching daughters to tolerate injustice for the sake of guarding the honor of their families. Often the society laying down different standards for men and women. Sometimes misplaced fears about their own children's future. Sometimes unquestioned religious beliefs, the fear of retaliation, fear of being ostracized, and a curious phenomenon of fear hidden under the cloak of affection. The suffering women had hundreds of reasons to tolerate and allow perpetuation of injustice and exploitation. Most had very few reasons to break free from the wrongs, let alone attempt to correct them. In short, I found that the voicelessness of many women is compounded by the blindness and deafness of the village around these women. The unpreparedness with many to lend themselves to change adds to the problem. They lack courage to cross over the status quo. The pathetic conditions of women I saw since an early age was the seed for my own rebellious nature and awakening. It taught me that awareness begins with oneself. I went through a phase where I faced frustration from the inability to bring awareness to women who lacked it. It took time for me to realize that for them to listen to me, I needed to first listen to them. Just listen until they are ready to help themselves. My patient population that I described earlier, who were victims of violence and abuse, I realized much later that there was a common thread between those Indian and American women. They came to see the doctor not to get help, but to share their stories with a woman who could understand. And instead, I was trying to help them, or so I thought. I was trying to tell them that there was another and better way to live life when the best help I could give them was to simply listen and not keep insisting on intervention. Dr. Sane mentioned in his talk the stories of women who participated in religious discussions and rituals during Vedic times, how the girls had Upanayan ceremonies like their brothers, and many such good privileges that unfortunately were not consistently continued. Today, there are very few families and institutions who conduct Upanayan ceremonies for girls. I fault myself that I did not insist on one for our daughter like I did for our son. Didn't know better at the time. During my lifetime, Hindu traditions have made some progress by having several women priests to conduct religious ceremonies like Upanayans and weddings. My mother in law had officiated the Upanayan ceremonies of her grandsons close to 3 decades back. I will share one incident today from my life that has to do with religious traditions. This is from 5 years back, November 2020. My father had passed away after a short illness, not from COVID, though it was in the middle of the pandemic. I was the only one with him in his last days. The evening he passed away, local friends rushed to help arrange for the funeral. They had a priest in mind, but someone brought up a doubt whether he would allow a female family member to conduct the rituals. What should we do if he asks for only a male family member to participate in these rituals, as is the tradition? My answer was quick, clear, and final: find another priest. If the priest is unable to accept a woman to perform these duties, then it is time to get a man who has adapted to better thinking with the passage of time, or simply look for a woman priest. No man who meant less to my father than me can be more qualified to assign my father's body to the holy fire when I am alive and kicking. My father would watch in disbelief if I allow such a thing. Such gender wise distribution of roles by tradition and the need to take a fresh look at them applies to our roles not just in religious rituals but in day to day life as well. Presently, most men are busy preparing papers for filing taxes. Most women never had to do this. I am one of them. I admit with much guilt and shame that I have no clue about how it is done. The same way that my husband never bothered to learn to make simple dal and rice in a pressure cooker for himself, despite my repeated requests. But I feel it is never too late to wake up. As both of us are aging, we never know when only one will be left behind to take care of all essential tasks. Minimum skills required for survival in the modern world must be approached with a more gender neutrality than the generations before us. As a mother, I tried to raise my boy with the understanding of gender equity and gender neutrality, simply because men can only understand the impact of gender disparities secondhand. Women understand it firsthand. Parents and elders can make or break kids, whether sons or daughters. Teach the kid to value themselves, like my father did, and nobody can devalue them. But that is only half the education. Valuing themselves and valuing others will give them the full set of skills needed to navigate their lives. The day I formally met the parents of my son's future wife, I had half jokingly announced, in their presence, a disclaimer to my son: I have tried my best to teach you to share responsibility for all chores at home, whether in the kitchen or outside of it. If you behave in a way that is not equitable towards your wife, that will be solely your responsibility. A special mention is needed for a special breed of men. These are men who are not part of the patriarchal culture. They are a minority, but they do exist in every generation and every part of the world. They genuinely see women as equal partners. Women's fight for equality would be even tougher if not for these men who are ready to stand up for their cause. I know many such men who deserve gratitude, respect, and recognition for being who they are and seeing women for what they are above and beyond the gonadal attributes. Having said that, I strongly feel that no woman should wait for a man to support her in exercising her rights and independence. The opportunities I had in my life are simply endless. To grow up in an educated household, to get advanced education and have an individual career, to grow up together with a man in a marriage partnership, to raise a daughter as well as a son, to experience life in a country with a whole different range of diversity than the country I grew up in, to travel to many places around the world, know about their history and culture, amongst other things. There were many opportunities that were missed either because of my ignorance or my ego or both. Not doing the open end ceremony for our daughter was an example of ignorance. Not taking the initiative to open a conversation with those who put me down were instances where ego stood in the way. Instead of I don't need you if you can't respect me, an attitude of we need to know each other better would have sealed some cracks. I see many things that I would probably do differently today. But then age brings confidence and experience. Young people can't be entirely blamed for their mistakes as long as they show willingness to learn and not repeat the same mistakes. It is clear from history, both remote and recent, that awareness doesn't appear easily for the majority. There is no incentive that is easily apparent for most men to allow equal status to women. Therefore, any sustainable and meaningful experience of gender equality is unlikely to happen without overcoming resistance. Whether at an individual level or community, national, or international level, it will have to be strategically and as a last resort forcefully wrestled out of the hands of a historically patriarchal society. When young women begin to understand this, they will learn to recognize when men resort to gaslighting, name calling, and slandering, or when women are considered incapable of handling some things that men have traditionally been known to do. I would emphasize to both men and women that women's rights and freedoms are not intended to turn the tables on men, and surely not for women to become perpetrators of abuse. They are simply necessary for society to function better. As a woman, I would tell myself on occasion of International Women's Day or Women's Month that I ought to speak up for a woman who is being wronged, and I ought also to speak up against a woman who wrongs. Stories from 60 years will never end. I will quickly round up with three vital truths I learned as a woman. First, every woman must know within herself that she is entitled to every freedom a man claims for himself. Secondly, if she wants to enjoy it, she must earn it by herself. Earning and handling freedom is no different from earning and handling money. It is a skill to be acquired at a personal level. Also, like money, if freedom comes from someone else, it cannot be guaranteed to last for a lifetime. Thirdly, a woman must know that there is always a choice before her to suffer or to stand up and assert her rights. Most reasonable men can hear when she stands up and speaks out. I had a few thoughts to share about spiritual freedom and its relevance in my life, but in the interest of time, I will leave it for another time. Perhaps when I tell you stories about the extraordinary women saints from Maharashtra from several centuries back. The only thing I will say today is that in the context of spiritual growth is particularly essential. I'm sorry, is that spiritual growth is particularly essential for accomplished women because it keeps the ego in check while asserting equal rights. It requires special set of skills to pass on the lessons you have learned to your family and extended family and friends, leave alone to anyone else. There is a saying in Marathi, "Pikta tithe vikat nahi." The sentiment is conveyed also by the phrase familiarity breeds contempt. I have learned from my patients that to be able to teach, one must learn to observe, listen, and first accept people as they are and where they are. If they ask you for your opinion and guidance, then give it freely. Until then, learn to shut your mouth. That's the difficult part when it comes to your children or close family and friends. I want to thank Dr. Sane again for giving me this opportunity to present my thoughts before such a special and learned audience as all of you. As you know, we share a set of grandparents, so this can be considered nepotism. I will not contest it. Nepotism or not, this was a very unique opportunity for me to reflect upon many issues in retrospect. I thank you for listening to my story and welcome you all now to share your thoughts and experience on this subject. Thank you.
Uh, I'm Kanaka Iyer, friend of Madhavi's for many years. Read her blog and was invited to join in today's presentation. Thank you so much, Madhavi, for inviting. And as always,
Anaka is an anesthesiologist who is in Los Angeles. She and I were together for our residency in USC.
yes, I've known the family, and such a privilege to listen to you or hear you talk. Um, Very deep, profound thought process and what you've gone through. A lot to think about. I will think of some comments, but right now this is all I have. Enjoyed the talk, Madhavi.
Thank you.
But no, it was amazing. I'm actually somewhat speechless. Yeah, I don't know. It's very hard. I don't know what to say. I'm kind of overwhelmed a little bit too, because I have been through similar, even today, I'm at the same hospital 30 years, and patients, I still walk in and they ask me, hey, can you take me to the bathroom? And then I tell them, yeah, your nurse will come and do that. But right now, can I take care of your problem that I'm here to see? But yeah, they just automatically assume I'm the tech or the nurse. But I don't know that will ever change. But besides that, yeah. So my Dr. Sani had asked me to share some things. So there are so many ways we have been discriminated and whatnot. But the one I can kind of bring to most recently is I had submitted my resignation. I was the chief medical officer of a phase one center here in Dallas, where I worked for about 20 years. And it was nonprofit. It was taken over by a for-profit. And with the change in management and everything, things just weren't the way I liked them. And so I submitted my resignation. And they didn't have anyone to replace me right away. So the CMO of the new company, he essentially threatened me, that I would have to stay, I would have to continue to work, and that he wouldn't even pay me. And he was trying to bring me down litigation and whatnot. And it was just mind-boggling, everything for me, because I had already submitted the resignation, and I was within my contract to do so. And I was very overwhelmed, and I didn't know what to do. But my girls, I have two daughters in their mid-20s, and they said, Mom, you can't let him override you. You have to fight. And so I was, so they said, if you just allow someone to walk over you, that's just what kind of model are you creating? Because I thought, who wants to get into litigation, right? But after talking to them, I decided, okay, I'm not going to put up with this. And I said, I'll fight this if I need to, but my resignation is going to stand, and I'm not going to come to work. And they actually had to back down. But this is just one most recent example I can tell you how he, he was a white guy, needless to say, much older gentleman. And but I stood up and I won. So I just want to say, but I would have easily backed away, because I just don't like to fight. That's just not, how we are not brought up, I guess. I don't know. We are used to being submissive. I guess that's where the upbringing comes in, patriarchal thing, like, why bother? We're just used to giving in all the time. And I think I have reached that point. I guess I have grown to where I won't give in. You have to stand up for the correct reasons. But it does take time, as you said. I couldn't have done that 20 years ago, but now I can. So, now I've just matured more. But I don't know if the same thing had happened 20 years ago. I don't know that I would have stood up. I would have caved in. But anyway, so I'm sorry, I'm not being very, I'm not being
I
as clear
remember that
as,
incident. It
yeah,
wasn't too long back. I remember that incident, and
yeah.
beyond what Minal said, that man had talked down to her in a very humiliating way. A man who was not a doctor was talking down to a doctor, um, essentially telling her what to do. And Minal's husband was on the speaker. She had kept it on speaker, and even his blood boiled to listen to the tone that man talked to Minal. It was really bad.
Well done, Meenal.
Roshni, you are on. Any thoughts you have?
But as a follow-up, I want to also comment on this, that shortly after that, Dr. Sanit Dada, you had a talk about Shama. And I said, so I truly forgive that gentleman from my heart, because I said, having any grudges against him is not going to help me. So I have forgiven him and and moved on. I just brought it today because the topic came up of discrimination and so forth. But I just want you to know that that talk happened right after that, and I said, I need to forgive this man, because it's not
That makes me feel better, though.
Yes. Yes.
May I comment something in addition to what Meenal said about Kshama? And the challenge is to handle any situation like that without ego being hurt, right? When you're insulted, is it a personal insult? Who's being insulted? How's the reaction? Why am I reacting this way? So if we can put aside ego and really look at the situation and take care of the problem, I think it will be better. And that comes obviously with experience and age and confidence.
Thank you, Madhavi. I just appreciate all your support and advocating for women. We've got a powerhouse of women here on this morning's discourse. I wanted to add to your number 3 of choosing to suffer silently or standing up. So I like that you're outspoken, and when you are outspoken and you speak your rights, you end up suffering anyway. So I think that I would rather say something when I see something and then just deal with the consequences than not say anything at all and stand up for other women. I just finished legal arbitration with a former employer, and it didn't turn out the way I wanted. And it's I keep reflecting. I'm so grateful for these discourses. I keep reflecting to the expectation and of reward for your work, and I worked really hard, and I came out and I spoke the truth. And my former manager lied while under oath. I proved it, and nothing has come of it. And so, I'm do I go forward? Do I contest it? Do I just drop it and walk away? I just think that in this patriarchal society that there will always be men who feel like they need to oppress women. Thank you so much for your insights this morning. I feel supported and empowered. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Colleen.
I have a comment to make. First of all, thank you very much. You remind me quite a bit about what my mother was like. My mother went through a great transformation, like some of your stories you tell. In fact, I was quite young, and I still remember it was a big story because she was a powerful woman and she did have her way, other than when my niece decided that she wanted to marry a man she liked, and the man liked her too. And her parents were happy with that. But my mother, as an older, I guess,
Generation.
aunt, was very forceful in questioning that because the man came from another tradition and didn't fit into the Gujarati mold that we were part of. That was years and years ago. Since then, my mother has been involved in making sure that any time any young woman had any complaints about her uh, husband or husband's family or whatever, uh, and a lot of people knew that, so they would come to her to ask what should she do. And I was stunned. Of course, I'd grown up by then, when she had a very clear answer. Well, you have as much right as he does. So uh, your wishes are as important as her wishes, as his wishes. So if you can't talk it out, just leave. My mother would say, just leave. Uh, you know, you can't live your life just fighting all the time because you have a life to live. And those were the kinds of, and the point I want to make is that this transformation occurred greatly because her two sons both had moved to America. And she had all this time and somewhat unhappy because she had all these aspirations that her sons would come back and do wonderful things in society and their life, and she'll share that. So she actually transformed that uh, inner unhappiness by moving into a spiritual life. And that's when we saw, when I visited India, our home was open to so many yogis and rishis, gurus that just come because my mother would be very supportive. And so so I feel that in some way the spiritual life, the Hindu spiritual life that uh, she had, even though she wasn't educated and she wasn't in any way part of the contemporary sort of modern world, she had become a very modern woman. And so I just want to share that story. And the other thing I have to ask you is that, you're very articulate, and your what I touch me is that your personal telling is done in a way that's very universal. So it's not like you're just telling about you, but you're telling to the world as a whole. And so I think you should put this on paper if you haven't done it, and have a book, publish a book of your story. It'll be a great service for a lot of people. And if you do, please let me know. I'll be the first one to buy it. Thank
You're
you.
very kind, sir. Yeah, but yeah, the story you told about your mom is really remarkable, you know. And uh, one thought had come to my mind when I was preparing for this talk, that men could lock the doors to many other freedoms for women, but historically they couldn't lock the door for spiritual freedom for women. That was available, through all the generations.
Hi, I mean, I don't have much to say. I just wanted to say it was a beautiful presentation. And I second the book idea. I think it would be really lovely for you to share the stories. And I think it's already inspired so many people to speak up about, stories that they've heard of other women or their own. And so it's important. It's important. These discussions are important.
Thank you, Roshni.
I really valued everything you told us this morning because I have for decades moved in circles that are primarily women's circles. And so I have not encountered these kinds of situations. And it's very good to be reminded that they still exist. And I mean, the situation has evolved, as far as I can see, has evolved substantially in a positive direction, especially in education and professions and so on, over since I was in college and my wife. But it's not the whole society. All these negative things still exist, and to be reminded of them, I think, would be in such a compelling way. That would be very, very valuable. I had one other very practical thought. My wife, Yvonne, was a very gifted artist, and she always wanted to be an artist. She grew up with parents who were immigrants from Switzerland, and her father was an engineer. And he leaned on her not to become a professional artist because the likelihood of making a living financially was very low. And he persuaded her that it was really important in order for her to be truly independent, to be able to get a position that could pay her adequately, not just follow her impulse. So she was in academia her whole life long. She was a trained biologist. And when she retired, she turned to the arts. Like she never gave it up. And she became a flourishing artist, and she went to schools and taught children and all that. But there was some real value in being urged to go for a position that would give her financial as well as personal independence.
Yes, John, what you say is so true. I mean, progressive fathers really thought about it that way. They, like, when I was in my high school years, I had to choose between an arts faculty or a science faculty, and I really was interested in literature, so I wanted to take up arts. And my father at that time said that, this is true at that time, now no more, but he said, if you become a doctor, you can be anything else. You can learn English literature. But if you do the opposite, you cannot become a doctor. So that was the thinking, that, yeah. So they made sure that we could earn our livelihood, as you said.
Namaste, Dr. Madhavi. I'm really very, very happy to hear you. I really like your presentation, and I have worked all my life, and I'm still working with low-income women or less educated women, and domestic violence and all sort of discrimination is very, very prevalent among us. And I always felt like, oh my God, I wish or maybe a higher paid job, a doctor or an engineer, maybe in a different situation. But hearing your story is very inspiring for me, and I will definitely feel better that it's not low income or anybody, but domestic violence and other discrimination towards women is very universal and is really important to. And I second the person who said that you should publish your book, because it's going to be very inspirational for people like me who are working with low income population, and also for the little girls that are growing up in our in our society. That I think being independent, being educated, being able to speak firmly and protecting your right is a basic human right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
But as you can see, I have quite a powerhouse of a mom. Outspoken since I was a young kid, has empowered me as her daughter. And I've been lucky to be in a multi-generational household with a grandmother who worked and was the primary breadwinner to raise 3 children. And, live in a much more patriarchal society at that time. And with my mom also doing the best she could as a working mother, raising 2 children to pursue higher education, I have to give her a lot of credit. I was at home last weekend when she gave her first talk, actually, along the same lines of this topic. And I overheard a comment made by someone in the group about how the men in their family were having a hard time getting married and finding partners, and attributing it to the women's movement to become more empowered. And it got me thinking about how much, even today we've spent talking about women's empowerment and how much discussion there is in my own household about women's empowerment between my strong mother, my strong aunt who's on this call, my strong grandmother. But I don't know if we give as much time to the empowerment of men and the evolution of men in all the, 60 years that my mom and my aunt have brought women forward from their mom. And I don't know if I can say my brother or my cousins, I'm one of 10 cousins on my dad's side. I'm the only woman among them. How many of them have had conversations in their own home about what men might be doing to catch up to all the work women have done? And that's just something I wanted to put out there as food for thought.
Yeah, that's a great comment, Amita. Well spoken, because they, I really don't know that men have had any discussions, and as women are changing, I don't think men have realized how their roles need to change. I think that is bringing out the disharmony, so to speak, that Arunji had alluded to before. Because I don't think men have changed their expectations to align now with the changing modern woman.
Yeah, and I gave my mom this analogy when we were debriefing after her last talk that, when something doesn't go my way, or if I don't get a job I want or a position I want, we're always looking to improve ourselves and improve our resume. And I hope that as women are being encouraged to do that, to grow and to rise and to become empowered, to become as outspoken as I'm proud my mom is, that men are also reflecting on what they might be doing differently to complement the changes that are happening with women, I think for the better.
Maybe the men here can talk, but I don't know that we have any young men, right, in this audience.
I'd like to know. I guess it'd be nice to know if the men in this group have had conversations with their sons about evolution. If women can evolve so much, why can men not do the same?
Amita, that's a good comment. I was thinking about it and I was about to say, I have 2 sons. I was raised with 3 of us daughters, so I didn't have a brother growing up. And my mother was a strong woman and gave us a lot of strength and confidence. And we're all working professionals. We did feel discrimination even in a small town, but somehow we were empowered. And I can mention several examples of how we had to overcome adversity because I was a woman and things like that, similar to Madhavi's stories. I have 2 sons, like I said, and I made it a point to remind them the importance of a woman's role and how they have to give importance. Hopefully, they will keep that in mind as they seek a life partner and as they lead their life. But I never fail to mention, I tell them, treat the woman with respect. And I talk to them constantly because I am aware. And I even point out, without putting a lot of blame on my husband, just point out little things that could be done better, and I tell them, see, dad is doing this. I still love him, but when you get married, when you have a spouse, this is how you should do things like that. So without throwing my husband under the bus, I guess I like to tell them. So it is an effort. People have to educate their young men, boys.
Well, I guess no other man is talking, so I'll speak up now. First of all, great job, Madhavi.
Thank you, Dad.
The way you do teach anybody in the family is by setting your own example. If you love your spouse, your wife in my case, I would be always around her. So when she was in the kitchen, I'll always be in the kitchen. If she is a superb cook, then I'll make sure all the material is ready for her. So working together was a key part. And not only that, when you see that, the children are observing you. They don't listen to you. They watch you. Once you set a tone in the family of working together as a family, they join too. So my son Shaker is an outstanding cook like his mother. So there's no question about carrying out those kind of respect for the spouse and love and cooking for in the house. So that is automatically. So as you were rightly saying, yes, tell the words, Amita, but show them by your actions. And when you do that, automatically that becomes an integral part of the next generation. Words are important, but your actions are more impressive. So that's the only thing I would say. I feel very fortunate that my wife was able to teach all of us how to become better human beings. And for that, I'm eternally grateful. We're together only for 65 years. So thank you.
Good morning, everyone. This is Raj Chaudhary from.
Hi, Raj.
Hi, good morning. I have retired from SEVA, Asian Indian Family Wellness Program, and now the CEO is Anjali Mishra Cameron. So we have been dealing with domestic violence for the longest time, 21 years for sure and beyond. And there are about seven shelters, mainstream shelters. There's one of them that's Asian Women United, where we tend to send many of the women that are in stress. So we have a men's circle. We took it upon ourselves to create a men's circle itself. Here we have been talking about educating the women about domestic violence, but it's the other way around. I think we need to educate our men. And how we started engaging the men was, even though the mission of the men's circle is to make sure that the women are respected in their homes and much more. I won't talk about that. But we have seen that the men, they really want to help. They really want to help. And how we started was starting with the kitchen itself. How many men actually do go work side by side? To Dr. Sani's question about being there, setting an example, that's an excellent way to do things. But how many, I think women themselves have done it to raising sons in India, where we have come from. And it's just the patriarchal system is set up that way, that women are not considered equal. They may be in some things, like women have the right to vote more in India than here. There are many setbacks, but as far as equality goes, we have a long way to go. And educating the men is the best part we can do. This is where the younger generation is for women and men. They want to change stuff. They want to change. And women and young women and young men do not want this patriarchal society set up. They want an equal partnership. And I've seen that many men and young couples are doing that. This is just my comment. Thanks for listening to me.
Those are very good comments, really. Thank you for those.
Well, Raj, your family shows the kind of teaching that you brought them up. One is a great attorney, first state senator for the country from Indian background. One is a big shot in the in American Army here, just retired, Ravi. And of course, another professor at Dartmouth College. It's all the hard work you and your husband Surinder working together and bringing them up. So you were saying, expressing what you have shown through your example, the way you are doing it, I think is just fabulous. Thank you for being part of the community, Raj.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sani. I think the women, now my sons are cooking in their homes, equal in the kitchen, whereas, and being part of it, where I used to raise them and talk to them in the kitchen, I said, learn this, how to pickle and how to clean, because you're going to be facing all that when you grow up in life. He said, well, I'm just going to vacuum and she can do the cooking. No, that's not going to work. But he's excellent cook. I just had him. They both made a pasta and brought over. They're not much about Indian cooking, like dal and sabji and roti. That's not going to happen. But so far, now the barbecue and vegetable part and all that, they are working in the kitchen.
Great, Raj.
They have to eat.
I think Madhavi should stop it now.
Okay. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.